"Are you just a waitress, or hiding something more?" Jason asked, setting the coffee down, his eyes locked on the woman who showed up every night, silent and distant. But tonight, there was a bruise on her face. And when he finally asked, "Are you running from someone?" she hesitated, then whispered, "My name is Emily, and I'm a billionaire's daughter. But now they're looking for me." Jason's grip tightened on the mug. This wasn't just a lost woman's story. This was something much bigger. Stay till the end, because the next twist will change everything. The wind screamed down Bleecker Street, clawing at the edges of Millie's diner like a beast desperate to get in. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered, casting jagged shadows over cracked linoleum and greasy tabletops. Jason Carter, 34 and hollowed out by life, stood behind the counter, his apron stiff with spilled coffee and regret. His hands, calloused from years of scrubbing dishes, trembled as he poured a pot of burnt brew into a chipped mug. It was 1 a.m. on a December night, so cold it felt like the city itself had given up, and Jason wasn't far behind. Once, he'd been somebody. Carter's Corner, his little cafe, had been a slice of warmth in a brutal world. Wooden tables he'd sanded himself, the smell of cinnamon rolls pulling in regulars like family. But debt, a ruthless economy, and a wife who'd walked out with half his soul had stripped it all away. Now, he was a single dad scraping by on tips, his 6-year-old daughter Lily waiting at home with a neighbor who charged by the hour. The landlord's latest eviction notice, taped to his door like a death sentence, sat crumpled in his pocket. He could still hear Lily's voice, small and hopeful. "Daddy, when's our cafe coming back?" Every shift at Millie's was a fight to keep that dream from dying completely. Then she walked in. The door creaked open, letting in a blast of icy air and a figure shrouded in shadow. A woman thin-hunched, wrapped in a tattered coat that smelled faintly of damp wool, shuffled to the corner booth and sank into it like she'd collapse otherwise. Jason barely glanced her way. Vagrants weren't rare in this part of town. But something stopped him mid-pour. Her hands. They peeked from frayed sleeves, pale and shaking, clutching a single crumpled dollar bill like it was her last tether to the world. He didn't know why. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the ghost of his own failures. But he grabbed a mug, filled it with steaming coffee, and crossed the diner. "On the house," he said, sliding it across the table. She didn't look up, just nodded, her scarf slipping enough to reveal a flash of piercing blue eyes. They locked onto his, sharp and unreadable, cutting through the haze of his exhaustion. A chill ran down his spine, not from a cold, but from something he couldn't name. She didn't belong here. Not like this. That was the moment everything changed. She came back the next night. Same booth, same silence. Jason started calling her Blue in his head. Those eyes haunted him, flickering with secrets she wouldn't share. He'd bring her coffee, sometimes a stale Danish he'd pocket from the kitchen, breaking Millie's no handouts rule without a second thought. Lily's babysitter had raised her rate again, and the heat in their crumbling apartment flickered like a dying pulse. But this small rebellion felt like a lifeline, a way to prove he wasn't broken yet. One night, the diner was a graveyard, empty except for the hum of the jukebox and the wind rattling the windows. Jason's legs ached, his head throbbed from a call with Lily's school about unpaid fees, and he couldn't take it anymore. He dropped into the booth across from her, cradling his own mug. "You got a name, Blue?" he asked, voice rough with fatigue. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her cup. "Emily," she whispered finally, so soft he almost missed it. The word hung there, fragile and heavy, like a crack in a dam. He didn't push, just nodded, and that's when it started spilling out. He told her about Carter's Corner, how he'd built it from nothing, how it had been his and Lily's future until the bank took it. He talked about Lily's drawings, taped to their fridge with promises he couldn't keep. Emily listened, her responses cryptic. "I've lost things too, or the world's a mask, isn't it?" Hinting at a story she kept buried. Jason didn't dig. He knew the weight of hidden pain too well. Their nights became a ritual. Coffee, scraps of apple crumble he'd smuggle, quiet debates about redemption over the jukebox's crackle. She'd laugh sometimes, a sound like breaking glass, rare and jagged, and it stirred something in him he thought was long dead. But then, one night, she didn't show. The booth sat empty. A day stretched into 3, then a week. Jason's chest tightened with every shift. Had she frozen out there? Gotten picked up? He scanned alleys on his walks home, the wind biting at his face. But she was a ghost, gone without a trace. 7 nights later, the door banged open, and there she was, stumbling, coat ripped, a dark bruise blooming across her cheek like spilled ink. Jason dropped a tray of glasses, the shatter piercing the silence. "Emily, what happened?" he barked, crossing the diner in 3 strides. She flinched, yanking her scarf up, her voice a rasp. "Nothing." "Drop it." Her eyes, wild now, begged him to listen. He clenched his fists, every instinct screaming to protect her, but he nodded, jaw tight, and brought her coffee instead. She stayed past closing, trembling in the booth as he swept the floor. He locked the front door, the click echoing, and she grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "You're different, Jason," she said, voice low and urgent. "You don't demand. You just give." He frowned, unease curling in his gut. Then she yanked off her scarf, revealing not just a bruise, but a face he knew, too polished, too famous. His breath hitched. "I'm Emily Sinclair," she said, watching him like a hawk. "Sinclair Global. Billionaire's daughter. Heir to it all." The words hit like a punch. Jason staggered back, coffee sloshing over his hand. "You're what? This was a game? You've been slumming it, screwing with me." Rage boiled up, sharp and bitter. All those nights, some rich girl's experiment. No, she stepped closer, eyes blazing. "It wasn't a game. I was searching for something real. My father's world, its vipers and liars. I hid, tested people. You didn't know me, and you still cared. That's why I'm here." Before he could process it, she pulled a key from her pocket, brass, gleaming, and pressed it into his hand. "It's a space. For Carter's Corner. Yours again." Cliffhanger. The key and the abyss. Jason stared at the key, its weight pulling him into a spiral. A handout. A billionaire's whim. His pride roared, "Throw it back, walk away," but Lily's voice echoed. "Our cafe, Daddy." He shoved it into his pocket, hand shaking. "I don't do pity," he growled. "But I'll take you to dinner. Tomorrow. Then we figure this out." Emily blinked, thrown. "A date? That's your answer." "Take it or leave it," he snapped, storming out into the night. His pulse hammered as snow stung his face. Had he just made a deal with the devil? Or something else entirely? Loving the suspense? Like and subscribe. Things are about to get crazier. The next night, they sat in a dimly lit Italian joint, steam curling from plates of spaghetti. Emily tore into him over breadsticks. "You're scared of help because you think it's weakness." "It's not, it's strength." Jason bristled, but her words sliced deep. He spilled it all, Lily's cough that wouldn't stop, the nights he'd gone hungry so she could eat, the debt collector's calls that woke her crying. Emily didn't flinch, just listened, her blue eyes steady. "By tiramisu," he relented. "If I take it, it's mine. No puppet strings. I pay you back, somehow." She smirked, nodding. "Deal." Weeks later, Carter's Corner rose from the ashes. Jason threw himself into it, reclaimed with tables, a counter he built with Lily giggling at his side, a chalkboard menu, her crayons decorated. Emily was there, sleeves rolled up, pouring coffee, bantering with regulars. Word spread fast, a haven in a cold city, a place for the lost. But the deeper they got, the more Jason saw her cracks, late-night calls she dodged, shadows in her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. She was running from something, someone, and it wasn't just her father's world. One night, as they scrubbed dishes, she froze, staring at a man outside, tall, suited, watching through the glass. "Emily?" Jason asked, but she bolted to the back, breath ragged. "Don't ask," she hissed. He didn't, but the questions burned. Days later, it came crashing down. A black SUV idled outside the cafe, and the suited man stepped in, flanked by 2 others. "Emily Sinclair," he said, voice like steel. "Your father's done waiting." Jason moved to shield her, but she pushed past, chin high. "Tell him I'm not his pawn anymore," she spat. The man smirked, tossing a folder onto the counter. Photos of her, bruised, on the street. "He knows your game. Come home, or this gets ugly." She trembled but stood firm. "Get out." They left, but the air crackled with threat. That night, she told Jason everything. A father obsessed with control, a life of paranoia, a night she'd fled after he'd locked her in a penthouse. The bruises? A fight with his security when she'd escaped. She'd disguise herself, testing the world for truth. Jason was her anchor. He pulled her close. "You're not alone anymore." Snow blanketed the city, and Carter's corner glowed warm. Jason and Emily hosted a free meal for the homeless. His vow from that first coffee, fulfilled. Lily darted around, passing out cookies, her laughter a melody. Emily, no longer hiding, leaned into Jason as a man in a patched coat thanked them. "This is it," she said. "What I needed." "Yeah," he replied, hand in hers. "For us too." The cafe stood as a testament. Rebuilt dreams, trust forged in shadows, love born from kindness. Jason wasn't just a struggling dad. He was a man who'd fought for his second chance. Emily wasn't just an heiress. She was his partner. Together, they turned a key into a home.